New York's Park in the Sky. Cutting through West Chelsea and the meatpacking industry, the ex-freight train line is now maintained throughout the year as a public garden for the residents of New York City. With contemporary design throughout the train line, complemented by the lush plant life and the garden's design, the site itself has become an icon in contemporary industrial design. Its former use as an industrial freight train on street-level tracks run by New York Central Railroad delivered food to Lower Manhattan. However, its time functioning as a railroad was short-lived, as the train line's replacement created a dangerous condition for the pedestrians. Its presence in the meatpacking district caused 10th Avenue to be known as Death Avenue, as by 1910 more than 540 people had been killed by the trains. The council's solution to this was hiring what became to be known as the West Side Cowboys. These were men on horseback, hired to ride in front of every train, waving red flags to warn pedestrians of the train's arrival. Beginning construction in the 1930s, the High Line provided a train line system that would support train lines with steel beams 30 feet in the air. This was part of a massive infrastructure haul project dubbed the West Side Improvement. This project would facilitate the removal of 105 street-level railroad crossings. This also brought the New York City railroads right to the upper floors of the warehouses and factories, in which they could pick up and drop off shipments directly. However, as an increasing amount of freight travel began to migrate into other transportation methods, most of which being trucks utilizing the new interstate highway system, the traffic on the High Line saw a steady decline. This led to part of it being torn down in the late 1960s, with the last train running on the day of Thanksgiving, transporting 3 carts of frozen turkey, November 1980. After its end as a functioning train line, it served as nothing more than a monument of the West Side Improvement, and in no time began to grow a plethora of vegetation as the wind would blow seeds from across the river. Being abandoned and unmaintained, there was no soil, which very much limited the variety of flora that was able to grow. However, with weeds and smaller plants growing, dying, and decomposing, a layer of soil suitable to promote growth of more plants came about. Eventually, the train line was flourishing with wildlife, watered by the rain, sheltered by the surrounding buildings and infrastructure. In the year 1999, 2 local residents, Joshua David and Robert Hammond, would meet to discuss the future of the High Line. Both with aspirations of keeping the High Line despite state plans of its removal, they started a not-for-profit group, Friends of the High Line. But with the mayor having signed papers for its demolition, the prospect of preserving the High Line seemed very unlikely. But just before demolition had begun, the Friends of the High Line had brought together a collection of architects, artists, business owners, and even civic leaders, all rooting for not only the preservation of the High Line, but the renovation of it. Fast forward to 2005, and the city government approved the community's proposal and got behind it, providing healthy funding for the project. It was then, after an international design competition, a design team led by Field Operations began planning the design of the High Line's transformation into a public park. The 1.25 mile or 2.4 kilometer stretch of the diverse gardens and public facilities takes strong inspiration from the melancholy beauty of the nature of reclaiming itself in a post-industrial ruin. This inspiration is particularly clear in its installation of gardens that emulate natural biodiversity found in the original overgrowth of the train line before human interference. The weather conditions that the gardens emulate are sunny, shady, wet, dry, windy, and sheltered spaces. High Line's use of informal paths is very apparent, oftentimes creating a gradient from paving into garden beds. The example shown uses a precast of concrete planks that comb into the garden bed, creating a landscape that visitors can meander through as they please in many unscripted ways. Again, reminiscent of the overarching design influence of nature reclaiming itself. The 2.4 kilometer runway of fluid pathways and lush vegetation also provide a wide variety of interactive areas, water features, dozens of art installations, and regular interactive live performances. Weekly meditation classes also take place along the park. The park's construction is in an inherently sustainable design, as it is repurposing an otherwise abandoned infrastructure into a unique public space, but the sustainable practice of the Friends of the Highland go much further. The plant selection throughout favours native, low maintenance and drought tolerant plants, which in turn cuts down the resources required to maintain the vegetation. Also, a number of bee hotels have been placed throughout the park. This is to facilitate over 400 different species of bees that inhabit New York City. These bee hotels, along with almost all the other materials incorporated from the vegetation to the construction, were all sourced within a 100-mile radius to reduce the carbon footprint and support local business. The design themes that tie so strongly to the structure's roots and history, while still giving a new flavour, is truly impressive. The design team's ability to approach the abandoned infrastructure with a contemporary public area in mind would not have been an easy task, but they, without doubt, successfully created an eco-friendly and carbon-neutral approach to such a unique project, making for a spectacular use of a train line that was once bound for demolition.